right. So, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh, sorry to startle some of you. I apologize. Just wanted to get us started with the last piece for today here. So we are going to talk a little bit more about our projects. I'm going to be taking us through to the next step of the projects here that we're working on right now. And so a couple of quick things. I want to show you a few things in Blackboard. Just a couple quick updates here. Oops. I thought I just did that, but I guess not. Whoops. It logged me out. And here I was thinking I was all ready to go. All right, so I just tried calling facilities, and I could not get through to anybody either, so that I could give them a piece of my mind, and it's probably for the better anyway. She again? Oh my, yeah, because she called earlier, and oh my goodness.
This is the building I work in. It's like this year round. Is it? Year round. We're
Wow.
wearing our winter coats, and my office is right downstairs. I have my winter coat on all winter.
Oh my goodness.
So.
Just wanted to point out to everyone here under UDL Academy Content Summer. Wow, it is really warm. Oh my goodness, I hope it gets better for you and everyone else. But it looks so suave. I'm on camera. I tried to dress up for the video. This is being preserved for all time here. I'm trying to. So under, let's see, where did it go here? Oh my goodness. Is that what it, yes, that's true. Oh my goodness, where did it go? Okay, so I created a link just for everybody to see, and now it's not here. I'm so sorry. I'm gonna share this to you. I created a link to Census Access for everyone that's in there. Is it on there?
It was under content, and then
I saw it too, and I can't remember how I got it.
oh no, it was in Brian's PowerPoint.
Ah, okay, gotcha.
AMT rotating at the very bottom.
Perfect. Sounds good. Because I created a link and put it up on Blackboard, but for some reason it's not showing up here. So I'll check it again and make sure that that's available for everyone. So there's a shortened link that'll take you to Census Access to work with. We're going to take some time tomorrow to work with accessibility of digital learning resources tomorrow. So we'll take quite a bit of time to go through things like Census Access. We'll be talking about ways to make our content more accessible in terms of our digital materials, such as Blackboard documents, Word documents, PowerPoint presentations as well too. So we'll take some time to work on that as well. I'd also like to point out that we're going to be working today as part of our homework, and I'll have a list of the homework up very soon for you before we leave. But one piece of the homework is working through worksheets 4 through 6. Under UDL Academy Tasks Summer, there is a Dropbox that has the UDL Academy worksheets. This is where you can upload your completed worksheets when you're done. And so on here now I have updated these files that are here. So you could go through and download them here if you didn't have them already. Most of you, from what I understand, have actually gone through and downloaded them, though. Sure. This is under the UDL Academy Tasks Summer. So the way I've organized everything in here is we had our pre-academy tasks before coming in here, and those are under UDL Academy Content. There's also UDL Academy content for the summer. So that's things like PowerPoint presentations, any handouts that we give. We make sure that those are uploaded in there for you. You'll notice that we also have on here UDL Academy Tasks Summer. So in terms of required tasks, for those of you who are looking to complete all the required pieces of the academy here, I gave you a checklist for what to complete. So worksheets 1 through 9, as well as the post-academy evaluation. And so all of those things that are required as part of completing the academy would be under here, the completed worksheets that you turn in there, as well as the post-academy questionnaires, which will show up a little bit later on. Question, Peggy? Yeah, yes, please. If you could please, the question was if we wanted all worksheets 1 through 9 at once, and yeah, that'd be great. Right at the end is fine. What you've probably found already is as you, worksheets 1 through 3, you're probably thinking, I might want to answer these a little differently based on what I learned today, based on what we've been working on throughout the sessions. And that's perfectly fine. So you'll find this is, as I refer to it, as an iterative process. You'll do one thing, you'll have to step back and make changes along the way as well.
Chris, how did you get to that? I'm having trouble finding it.
Sure, the question was how did I get to here? This is, so on the side I have things located as,
UDL Academy Summer.
yep, and this is UDL Academy tasks for summer. So the required task, anything that's a requirement, would be under the required tasks. So you'll have things such as the checklist that'll tell you the worksheets, as well as the questionnaire. And then anything that's any sort of content, such as PowerPoint presentations, handouts, that type of thing, that will fall under the UDL Academy content. Under something, yep. Oh, I'm not sure, I saw a couple hands here.
Can you just clarify, would you rather have all the completed worksheets at once?
Yep, so the question was if I wanted all the completed worksheets at once, and yes, please, that'd be great, yep. And then if you want to put them all together as one document, Word document would be great, actually. If you just want to type right on that Word document, it's fine. If you want to print and write on it, that's fine too. But yeah, it's great if it's...
So you're asking us to do the worksheets 4 to 9 by tomorrow?
4 through 6, 4 through 6. So the question was if it was...
But you want 7, 8, and 9 too, correct?
Yes, anytime after the academy is fine. So
okay,
some
got it.
of you will want to have those done maybe, let's say, before the end of the week, and you can just upload those to Blackboard when you're done. So, Tabor, you had a question? Yeah.
The question was, I'm enjoying doing my worksheets, and I'm getting a lot out of that for my course.
Yep.
But as far as completing all of this, if we're not from OCC,
Yep.
what are the requirements here?
If you're not from OCC, it's whatever you want to do.
Okay. Is it really helpful if we take the questionnaire at least so that you can see, you
Oh,
can map it?
it's definitely
oh,
helpful
they
for-
started out ignorant and now they know all sorts of stuff.
Definitely. It's very helpful to us in terms of evaluating the academy. It's very helpful to us to know, what were our participants like at the beginning? What are they like now? It's very helpful to us as we're trying to make decisions about where to go with the academy. And so, yes, we would definitely very much appreciate it. We do give time at the end of the academy for all of these wrap-up type things, like to fill out the questionnaires. So those are the kind of things you wouldn't have to even take home with you. We could do them before we leave. Yep, excellent question.
Is there a particular date you want everything by?
The question was, is there a particular date for requirements? And I would say that for those, for our OCC participants, the sooner the better, because for the OCC participants who are looking to receive the stipend, then yes, that will. It does take a little bit of time to process those in the summer, so the sooner the better. So. Excellent questions. Anything else, housekeeping-wise, before we move on? I'm going to move through my PowerPoint as quickly as I can while not being too quick, but the idea being that I want to give you time to be able to work a little bit on your projects with each other before we go today. So I want to talk today about addressing barriers to learning. So UDL Project 1 yesterday, we talked about beginning to identify the barriers to learning. Yesterday we were doing some analysis work. Today we're going to start thinking a little bit about, a little more analysis, but starting to move into that design piece. So the first thing is, by the end of today's workshop, we're going to be able to revise an existing lesson in our course or an existing unit in our course by applying the UDL framework. So it may not happen by the time I'm done here the next 20 minutes or so, but the idea is that we want to get ourselves on that process getting started.
Is this part of the summer one?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question. What was that? I'm sorry?
I guess I didn't understand. Is project 2 something for the summer?
The project, well, this is when we were, the question was what the project was for the summer. This is the project.
I'm confused with project 2 is.
Oh, no, this is just day 2 of the project. So when I say UDL Project 2, this is part 2 of my piece of the project. Yep. So, yep, it's not a second project. Yep, good question. Yeah, they're wondering why I'm calling this UDL Project 2. This is just part 2 of the UDL project piece that I'm talking about, at least. That's a good point. I'll have to make sure to make that change for next time. So I want to give us a case study. I want to give us an example that we can work with, that we can think about as we're beginning to revise our courses. So as Hetzi had mentioned, you can find many examples on the UDL on-campus website, and so I provided that there for you as well. But as I was looking through trying to use one of those, I figured I'm just going to take my own, and I'm going to just quickly try to come up with one that's related to Spanish in the classroom, something where I can give some information to you. So we're going to imagine this is Dr. Smith teaching a face-to-face lecture course in Spanish to undergraduate students at a community college. And she wants to ensure her course is universally designed so it can reach as many learners as possible. So that's our scenario. The first thing I want us to think about is which of the following do you think Dr. Smith should consider first when modifying her course? Should she consider her learning goals, the materials, the instructional strategies and methods, the sequencing of the content, or the assessments? So think, I'm hearing a few things here. So I'm hearing learning goals. Any other suggestions? So I'm hearing a lot of learning goals. That would be my suggestion too. So learning goals would be what I would recommend starting out with. We talked a little bit about learning goals yesterday, but I want to give a brief review of that. It's a statement of what students should be able to do upon completion of a segment of instruction. And again, I'm using the term learning goals because that's what CAST uses, C-A-S-T, CAST. That's what they use to describe setting goals for learners. And so they talk about setting effective learning goals, and they say that they don't specify how to achieve the goal when you have an effective learning goal. You want to keep in mind the 3 learning networks that Hetzi described earlier.
So to do learning goals for each unit of instruction, or learning goals and then the whole course following from, or both? Or both?
It will depend on, for example, you might find that you want to have a learning goal for each day of class, or for each week of class. Or you may find that for the entire semester, you have learning goals that you could use as well too. I'm going to right now for this, I'm going to give a learning goal for just a unit of instruction at this point. So just a unit of instruction. It will be challenging for learners and require them to be independent and self-directed. So taking a look at the learning goals, Dr. Smith's original learning goal, well, she didn't really have one. So she hadn't really thought through the goals. She was kind of flying by the seat of her pants, or he was, I can't remember if it was he or she. She identified the following learning goals for a lesson on expressing likes, dislikes, and interests. That students will be able to express 3 things they like to do and 2 things they do not like to do when communicating with a classmate. So in terms of this, at our college, in our Spanish courses, we do organize it according to 4 skills plus culture. So in other words, speaking, listening, reading, writing, plus culture. However, in terms of this learning goal, I haven't specified whether it's speaking or writing at this point. At this point, focusing on the communication aspect. So we have our goals. Which of the following should we consider next then? Should we consider the materials, the instructional strategies and methods, the sequencing of content, the assessments, or do you think it's none of the above?
Assessment.
Okay, so I'm hearing assessment. I'm hearing sequencing. Ooh. So usually that first one with learning goals, I usually hear that first question I hear right from the bat, learning goals. But this is usually where I start hearing lots of different things. So I would argue, and this is according to UDL, but also according to many instructional design models, will encourage you to look at assessment next, and to think about where do you want students to be and how will you know that they've gotten there? So we've looked at our learning goals, and then we want to think about, okay, so we want them to reach a certain learning goal. We want them to be able to express 3 things they like to do and 2 things they don't like to do. Well, how am I going to know that? So we want to start to think about assessment. Assessing will tell us whether or not the learners have reached that goal. So in terms of formative assessment, which we talked about yesterday, formative assessment provides feedback. So formative feedback, it provides feedback to learners, and it can be both formally and informally. So as we talked about yesterday, some examples of formative assessment might be a quiz, could be a required draft of a term paper, and maybe you give feedback on that required draft along the way. It could also be more informal. So it could be student-teacher conversations where you give feedback in one-on-one with students during class. Whiteboards in an online classroom, clickers, poll everywhere, like what we saw with Hetzi today. We've also talked about summative assessment as well. And summative assessment provides a summary of the learning. And this will tell us if they've met the learning goals along the way. It gives us a summary of whether or not they've learned and met the goal that we want them to reach. Tests, exams, final papers, presentations, etc. One other thing I want to add that we didn't talk about yesterday, though, are constructs. And this is where we want to start thinking in terms of universal design, is about the constructs. So a construct refers to the information or the skill that an assessment purports to measure. So this is where we want to start thinking about, do our assessments measure what they're supposed to measure? Do our assessments do what they're supposed to do? And in many cases, yes. We'd want to be careful to tie our assessment to our learning goal. So in other words, if I want to know if students are able to express 3 things they like and 2 things they don't like, I sure better make sure that I'm testing to see, can they express 3 things they like and 2 things they don't like. You want to make sure that you're using both formative and summative assessments then to know if students have reached that learning goal. So here's where looking at constructs becomes important. And this is where we think about accommodations and think about universal design for learning, is where it's important to keep in mind what constructs are we measuring? And are there any other constructs we're measuring without realizing it? So in other words, we want to make sure that we're not actually bringing in any other constructs along the way that are going to interfere with measuring the constructs of interest. So this could have a negative effect on students. And I'll give you an example. So the example that I typically think of is we oftentimes will give accommodations for testing. And it's something that maybe you have an extra time and a half, twice the amount of time. The reason for this is oftentimes we want to make sure that we're avoiding measuring constructs that are unrelated to the construct of interest. If our construct of interest is to know if students have learned certain amounts of information or a certain type of information a certain way, we don't want time to be an unrelated construct that is interfering with our ability to measure students' performance in our class. So accommodations can help to make sure that we're measuring the constructs that are most important to us. So one last thing I want to say as well too, I'm also faculty. I also understand that papers, term papers, tests, these are part of learning as well too. So we don't want to necessarily go and throw out all our tests and think we're going to start all over again from scratch either. Testing, term papers, these are also important parts of learning. You might want to think though about some of the things that Hetzi talked about. Maybe there are other choices we can give for certain assignments, and maybe there are some times that we can't. We might want to think, are there other ways we could assess students' knowledge and skills? Could our assessments be more flexible? Could we offer more than a term paper? And to me, what's most important is we want to think about formative assessment along the way. as well too. And that's one of the big things that's going to come up along the way as well as we're working through worksheets 4 through 6. Is we're going to start thinking about whether we have any formative assessment and whether we could put some into place. Just one last little thing to think about. Maybe start to consider what else can students do to demonstrate their knowledge of the constructs in your course. Would it be possible to have a weekly blog for students? Would that be more fun for you as well? Could they create something that provides an equivalent amount of knowledge, that demonstrates the knowledge? Could they give a presentation, have an oral examination, etc.? Question, Rekha, before we move on? I'll repeat it if you want. Okay. Unless it's complex.
Thank you. So my question is regarding so are you talking about varying the assessments overall within the class, but with everyone still doing the same assessment, where students would have the ability to do maybe better on the presentation than they would on the paper, but they still have to do both? Or do you sometimes offer a choice within each assignment where one student can do a presentation, another student can do a paper, and you just are evaluating those side by side?
Oh, that's a great question. I love design, and so I'll start off by saying that design is an art and a science in many ways. So I would say that the science of it, we can go through and use the UDL framework in a scientific way, but there also comes that art of design, and so that becomes a question of what you think is going to be most appropriate. There may be times when you determine that there's a certain type of assessment that needs to be this way. No questions asked, we just have to do it that way. We have a required final exam for each of our levels of our languages, and so we have to prepare all of our students to meet those goals, to meet the requirements of that final exam. But then how we prepare students for that becomes our choice at that point. So that's where we could then have some different choices along the way. The one thing I would definitely say is that we don't want to go about making any changes that are going to affect our curriculum, because there's a whole process, obviously, as we all know in this room, there's a process that we go through for that. So I'm certainly not suggesting we try to change curriculum that we are unable to change.
So speaking of changing the curriculum, I get that. But suppose a deaf student wants to take Spanish.
Excellent, yep.
How do you then apply UDL to that situation? What do you do? Person cannot hear the language being spoken, but would like to be able to read and write the language. Would that be acceptable in your assessments?
It's a great question. What I would say in that case is I have not had to deal with that situation. Just right off the bat, I'll say I haven't dealt with that situation. I would go about it two ways. One, I would work with the American Sign Language faculty that we have on campus, because I would like to make sure that what I'm providing is, because I do have a colleague who has taken Spanish as a deaf faculty member. She and I have had many conversations about this. So I would consult with her to make sure that she thinks it's appropriate. We have a good relationship. I'm very fortunate for that. The other thing that I would do, though, is at this point, my first thought is I would probably have to make accommodations as opposed to changing with the way the course is developed right now and what our learning outcomes are. But we could still make it work for sure, without a doubt. And so I don't have the answers in terms of design right now, but I would, without a doubt, make it work.
The oral,
So the oral components of this, if you're requiring students to speak Spanish, that puts the deaf student at a disadvantage.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
If you're measuring that person's ability to, basically hear and reproduce, and obviously they cannot do that. So
You and I can have we should have a philosophical conversation about this later. But the good thing about this is that I would say that as of right now, we are on a 4 skills plus culture model here at the college.
what is it?
A 4 skills plus culture. So in other words, listening, reading, speaking, and writing, plus culture. But ACTFL, which is our national organization, doesn't specify They don't use a 4 skills model. They use a 3 modes of communication model. So it is something that we have not moved towards that, but it is something that on a national level, we could definitely talk more about. I think it'd be interesting. Yeah, definitely. Yep. So, in terms of assessment, Dr. Smith previously assessed learners through a test of grammar, such as through the verb gustar, and many students were unsuccessful. But what also happened was there's just no connection. They didn't see what was the connection to what was taught in the course. So Dr. Smith decides to make some changes. She has a summative assessment. She keeps this test of the verb gustar. But then she begins to conduct one-on-one speaking exams during the written test. For a more authentic situation, they invite each other to an event. So inviting to a party, etc. So they're talking about their likes and dislikes and what they'd like to do. But now we have something that's a little more authentic. And in terms of formative assessment, she now has students have a choice of completing grammar practice online or in a paper workbook. So they can express practicing their likes and their dislikes, pastimes, invitations, etc. with a classmate. So you have that washback from the assessment now is affecting the practice. There's a washback effect that comes from that now, that you have more authentic practice as a result of more authentic assessment. Now she circles the room and provides feedback. So real quick, I'm going to move quickly through here so I can give you some time to work on your projects here. So methods would be next. After we have our learning goals, then we look at our assessments, then we look at our methods, which are our approaches, procedures, activities, other things that take place in and out of the classroom. The instructional strategies that we use, the instructional methods and approaches we use. So UDL, CAST suggests making our methods flexible and varied. So my suggestion to you when you're completing worksheets 4 and 6 is to keep the UDL guidelines handy. Worksheet 4 is an opportunity for you to brainstorm, for you to critique your unit of instruction as it currently exists. You'll take a look and you'll critique your formative and your summative assessments. You'll take a look at your instructional strategies and instructional methods. So when you're thinking about your instructional methods, keep those UDL guidelines handy. Have a paper copy, have the UDL guidelines, which I'm going to go and show you a workflow to go through that in a few minutes here. The idea is critically look through what am I doing well according to the guidelines and what can I do differently. So this is an opportunity to be critical of your instruction when nobody else is really looking. So Dr. Smith's original lesson, students would read the text before coming to class. They sit through a lecture on the verb gustar and pastimes. They complete a written grammar activity on paper. And then they have a spoken activity with a partner. But now she's made changes. So her revised lesson before class, students still read the text before coming to class, but now there are choices for accessing the information. She's providing an electronic copy of the text as well that comes in the textbook package. So it comes with the physical textbook and the e-text as well as part of the textbook package they get. She also provides a link to a captioned video from the publisher, and this helps to demonstrate the text in a more dynamic way that the textbook itself, as a fixed static document, does not. These are all things we could probably do, most likely, right? Hopefully, the idea is the case study here will hopefully help you to see, okay, I can use some of these ideas in the classroom. And many of you are probably already doing a lot of these things. Her revised lesson now, she activates background knowledge. She's using a more interactive lesson with practice. And now she's offering choices of activities to complete in the classroom too. Whereas before there was one practice activity to work on with a classmate, she now provides 4 options, choose 3. One is a grammar-based activity, one is a written presentational activity, one is written interpersonal, one is oral interpersonal. So they must choose at least one interpersonal activity, one where they're communicating either in written form or in spoken form with each other. Afterwards, she debriefs with the students after they work on the activities. And then in terms of providing options for self-regulation, she asks them what they chose and why they chose to do that as well, getting them to reflect on their learning afterwards when they're done. So, and then she ends with a ticket to leave activity. So in other words, students write or speak to her one like and one dislike. So there's this formative assessment with feedback before they leave the classroom at the end of the day. So last piece, materials, and then I'm going to have you work on your projects here. So materials are the media for presenting content. And we often think of multimedia. We think of videos. We think of that type of thing as media. But media are anything that students are using or that you're using with them in the classroom that they can use to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding, or that you're presenting content to them with. We want these materials, these media, to be varied and flexible as well. So I would encourage keeping three things in mind when choosing them. Help all students meet the goals. And so we want to keep in mind that we want to have flexible materials that are going to help all students, such as an e-text, for example. And on campus here, you can work with Brian Shepherdson with that. Or in many cases, your publisher could even provide it as part of your textbook package. And in our case, we would actually, within our department, able to provide that as the same price to be able to include the e-text within our textbook package. Consider low-tech and also tech-based solutions. And you want to ensure that students can use these materials on their own as well, too. Question, quick.
A smart book and an e-text are the same thing, correct?
She's asking if smart books and e-text were the same. I'm actually not sure what a smart book is. I'm sorry, but I assume so. I assume so, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry. An e-text will be an electronic copy of the textbook, though. But I'm not sure what a smart book is. I'm sorry, Jane. Do you have an example of one of those?
I do.
Or actually, can we talk about it afterwards? I just want to get through this, and then we'll chat a little bit more. So, thank you, Chris. All right, so in terms of materials, Coursera Ivy Visions, what she did that's going to affect her whole course, she negotiated with the textbook company to provide an accessible e-text for all students, and not just for students with accommodations. And she made sure all digital learning resources were more accessible to students as well. So she went through and she followed the things that I'm going to teach you tomorrow about how to make your digital learning resources, your Word documents, your PowerPoints, everything more accessible. So stay tuned for that tomorrow.
Do you also teach us how to negotiate with textbook companies?
I don't, but you'd be surprised. A quick phone call will make a big difference when it comes to working with a textbook company. Yeah, I was surprised at how well we were able to make that work out. She also started uploading all. Was there a quick question, Petra?
Yes, I have one question. It is going into the same direction because I'm using a textbook that I chose to just use the paper copy of because the ebook version is inaccessible and very frustrating for the students to use. So, and my question is a little bit bigger, and that speaks to many of those things that we have discussed. I am all for implementing a lot of these as soon as I get home, but I always feel that it's the onus of the instructor to do better, and which often means do more work. I like the idea of providing 4 different exercises that the students just have to do 3 of, for example, but that is a lot of extra work. And it just frustrates me so incredibly that we don't have any or not enough support from textbook companies, for example, who do not, like our textbook does not comply with the Web Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 and things like that, and it's just really frustrating.
I agree with you, and I have part of the reason why I know that the new version of our textbook is more accessible is because I've had to make sure that it is. I had to get on the case of our textbook publisher, and they were already working towards this, which was good, but there were a lot of outside. They had outside evaluations done to make sure in terms of accessibility. But then when you have when the user says that it's not accessible, I find that's very important and let them know. But they made a lot of changes because of the fact that I was able to call them and talk to them and say, we need to make these changes. It's just not working in this current format. And so a lot of it is, what I thought was neat is that beginning to work with them helped me to build that relationship with them as well too, which led to, you know, they came to me asking me, is this much more accessible than before? These types of things as well too. So I'd encourage you even just to contact the book rep or the publisher and see what you can do. You'd be surprised. They want their products to be accessible. At least that was my experience, is they wanted their products to be more accessible. So, yeah, and the other thing too, expressing just what you're saying as well, that you need more activities in the textbook. Letting them know we want more varied activities as well too is also helpul as well. This is a great point. It's a great point. In terms of other course-wide things that you can do, she uploaded all her presentations to the Blackboard ahead of time. And so the nice thing about this is it helps students who use a screen reader. It helps ASL interpreters as well too to have these things ahead of time. And it also helps all the other students who take a look at the PowerPoint ahead of time as well too. In terms of unit-specific revisions, she now has choices for preparing for the lecture, choices for completing homework assignments. It could be online or in paper. It's still the same assignment, but it's just online for one or paper for the other. You still got to do the work one way or another. There's now formative assessment. And now there's multiple means of demonstrating knowledge through summative assessment. So students aren't going to get out of doing the homework assignments. You got to do it one way or another. It's just now you can do it online or you can do it on paper. There's going to be more ways to get feedback along the way, which will be helpful. You're still going to have to demonstrate that you've met the learning goals, but now we have multiple means of demonstrating that knowledge. So real quick, I want to refer you to UDL on Campus, as well as some other UDL examples. I've put some bit.ly links on here on the PowerPoint as well, so you can take a look at those. And real quick, because I want to give you a chance to work on your assignments here, Worksheet 4 is a tough worksheet. I will just say that right now, it's very difficult. So I'd encourage you to take the time to be critical of your own work. It will be worth it when you come up with a solution you're proud of, but it's a tough one. Let me show you what it looks like real quick. I'll show you that. I'll just use the faculty one for now and as an example. And I know you won't be able to see this perfectly well, but I'm just going to bring us here to Worksheet 4. Oh, I was just there. Oh, I thought I clicked to the navigation link. I guess not. There you go. So what it asks you to do is to analyze your current learning goals for your unit of instruction. And it may be that you haven't really thought through that at all yet. Maybe you don't have any learning goals yet as well too. You take a look at your formative assessment measures and look to see what are the strengths of them, what are the challenges of them. When I say challenges, I mean weaknesses. It's my very nice way of saying what's the weakness in it. So what's your challenge? What's your weakness basically in terms of that? In terms of your summative assessments, what weakness in terms of what you learned from HETC today do you find? And then when we get to question number 4, this is where it gets challenging. This is where I ask you to take the UDL guidelines and then look at your instructional methods, your instructional materials, any part of your course, and look to see, in terms of the UDL guidelines, what am I doing well, what am I not doing well? And this is tough because you have to look at what you're doing and begin to criticize yourself. And that's not an easy thing to do. So if we were to take a look, I'm going to give you some, where are we going to find these UDL guidelines? How am I going to know how to do this? If you go back into Blackboard, under UDL Content Summer. So remember, everything that's content related, such as handouts, any links that are related to the Academy, PowerPoints, et cetera, are all in the UDL Academy Content Summer area. And if we scroll down a little bit, you'll notice I have a folder here that says UDL Principles and Guidelines Documents. When you go into that folder, you'll see a few different links here. One is a link to an online version of the UDL Principles and Guidelines. Let me real quick show you what that looks like right now. This is a great site in terms of organizing all of the UDL principles and guidelines and checkpoints all together. You'll notice at the top here of the web page, you have engagement, representation, action, expression. If we take representation, for example, and look at perception, when we click into the perception, provide options for perception, it tells us what that is. As we scroll down a little bit further, it gives us these checkpoints. These are the documents I would suggest taking a look at, these checkpoints. So if we look at checkpoint 1.1, offer ways of customizing the display of information, we can find out what does that actually mean. It gives us a definition, but then it gives us different ideas of how we could use that. So for example, it talks about the font used for print materials, the size of text. We want to be able to have a way for students to be able to control that. A lot of that comes from just having them available on something like Blackboard. All right, let me go back again to perception. I'm going to go again to now offer alternatives for auditory information. And so this is where you might, for example, provide written transcripts for video or auditory clips. Maybe at this point, you might look at your instruction and you might say, poof, I have videos with no captions. I have videos, I don't have any transcripts. I have no way for anybody who, I have no way for the deaf or hard of hearing to access my content. That's when you can say, this is my challenge right here. But you might say, for example, that you provide diagrams that are very helpful as well. So you have some strengths, but you also have some weaknesses to work on. Go back to perception, do the same thing. You do have action expression, go into physical action, let's say. Click on one of these checkpoints, vary the methods for response and navigation. Look at the examples and say, oh, maybe I don't have any way to physically respond. So it's all paper pencil test. So we have a very hard time. I have no way for somebody who may need a method of input as opposed to just paper and pencil. This is a weakness right now and something I need to work on. If you keep this window snapped to one side, this one snapped to the other, and just go through and write down your strengths and challenges, you'll start to see, oh, there are things I'm doing really well and things I want to work on. Worksheet 5. Just answer the first question. I actually did this for every one of them here. So worksheet 4, I've given you an example of me going through and analyzing my own work. Worksheet 5, you'll see worksheet 5, just answer the first one. What do you want to see happen after you incorporate the UDL guidelines? Do you want to see increased retention? Do you want to see more students be successful? Think through what it is you want to see as a result. Do you want to be happier teaching your course? That's all. That's a perfectly reasonable goal. And the last one, brainstorm solutions. This is also a time-consuming one. This is where you look at your means of assessment, instructional methods, and instructional materials, and you start to brainstorm solutions. You start to think, okay, in terms of providing options for perception, in terms of instructional materials, I can provide captions to all of my videos. I'll submit my videos to the captioning service that we have here at OCC, and I'll make sure all my videos have captions. Might be one way to go about it. You might, when it comes to providing options for language, mathematical expressions, and symbols, you might say that in terms of your means of assessment, you might allow students to use, I don't know, again, it's brainstorming. Maybe they can use some sort of guide that helps them with the vocabulary or that helps them with certain terms in math. I'm not sure. Again, I'm leaving this up to you in terms of your expertise and what you're allowed to do in terms of your curriculum. But that's where you can just think of all of the ideas. What could I possibly do? Eventually, you're going to say, I'm going to choose one idea from here, one idea from here, one idea from here, and I'm going to put these into my course. And that'll be it. So you can come up with, let's say, 20, 30, 40 different ideas on here that you brainstorm, and then you choose 2 or 3 of them, and that's what you do. So the idea would be come up with lots of ideas. Whatever you come up with is going to be good because these are your ideas, but then you just pick and choose what you think are the best ones. Questions, concerns? I went a little over my time, I apologize, but is there anything I can answer in terms of questions? Again, this is tough. This is where you really start to look at your own course and think, what can I do in terms of UDL to make improvements and to help students. And I find this is the fun part. So I'm here to answer any questions for a little while longer. And yeah, you got a question, Jane? Oh, we can chat. Okay, we'll chat here. Oh yeah, it's off camera, right? Yep, excellent, yep. Any other questions? Well, if you want to take a few minutes to work in groups, you can. I'll walk around the room, help out along the way as well too, and yeah, we'll take it from here.